This morning, we're going to be introducing a new series of messages. Most of you know this is the month of Mother's Day, and so we're going to be talking about fearless. 5 ladies who changed the world, rock the world with incredible faith and how God used them. Some are in the Old Testament, some will be in the New Testament. This morning, we're going to focus on a lady who had incredible faith and was just completely fearless. And so I'm excited this morning to share with you guys about these individuals. If you have your Bible, you can turn to Exodus chapter 2, and I will begin going through kind of the background before we read our passage. I want to talk to you about being fearless and full of hope. See, here's the difference. Some of us are fearless, and fearless will get you in trouble. You know what I'm saying? You got to be fearless and full of something as well, full of wisdom usually. Fearless and full of hope is what we'll be talking about this morning. So I want you guys to understand, this lady was up against incredible odds. I mean, it was just so incredible what happened. Caleb, could you grab me a small table? I forgot to bring it with me. We're going to talk about a lady named Jochebed. Now, that's a weird name, you know what I mean? So we're going to call her JoJo, okay? That's her nickname this morning. Now, when we get to heaven and I see JoJo, she's going to be upset with that, but that's okay. It's going to help us this morning so that every time I say her name, you're not like, what a weird name, and I lose you, okay? So in Exodus chapter 2, JoJo had a real problem. Here's the deal. She lived in a country where she was not wanted. All right? She was a part of a people group that was no longer wanted inside this country. She was in Egypt, but she was not an Egyptian. See, centuries before that, her descendants had moved into Egypt during a time of famine because Joseph, one of her great-great-great-grandfathers, uncles or whatever, had made a way to save not only Egypt, but the rest of the world from the famine that was crushing the world. And so her descendants moved into Egypt, and Pharaoh, he took care of them, man, gave them the choice land, gave them the best of everything. But here's the deal. When 12 brothers move into a country and start having children and grandchildren, it doesn't take long for 12 to turn into 100, 1,000, a million, a lot of people. And so the Egyptians, they were not too keen on all of these Hebrews living within their borders. Because they started having so many kids, the Egyptians said, well, it won't be long until they rise up against us and they take over our land. And they were afraid of anyone who was not from there, who didn't look like them. Sound familiar? And so they started doing something that was terrible. In Exodus chapter 1, the Bible tells us that the leader, Pharaoh, he started killing all of the small children. He said, they're having too many kids. And here's the deal, and I don't want to be crude here, but if you have a people in slavery, and they were in slavery, and all they have to look forward to is getting home and having a meal, and they have not many freedoms, with their spare time, they're going to start having children, okay? Because that's really all they have to do to look forward to. So they had a lot of kids, and they were strong. They were working out in the fields. They were making bricks and stone, and they were strong individuals, so they got scared of them. So they said, we've got to get rid of these children. So they started grabbing all of the kids, little babies, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, and tossing them into the Nile River because we all know those crocodiles will take care of anything you throw in there. But this lady, she said, no, I'm not going to do that with my child. I'm not going to turn him over willingly. And so Pharaoh and his men, they would start going through towns and villages, and they would try to find all of the infants, all of the babies. And we're going to pick up our story in Exodus chapter 2. Read with me. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as his wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman, this is Jochebed, we find out her name in other chapters. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. That word beautiful, I know all of you think your baby's beautiful. That's not all that it means there. It means he was a child full of potential. When she saw that he was a goodly child, other translations might say. When she saw that there was something special and significant. Now hear me. Every mother, when they look at their child, they are special, they are significant. And I believe there are many other Hebrew mothers who felt the same way. But what we have recorded is her one story of how she saved her baby. So we're going to read that story. So she hid him for 3 months, and after 3 months, look, we all know how it gets. A newborn is beautiful and cute and cuddly, but once they get a little bit older, they start making noises. They start doing things that draw attention to them. They don't just make noises, they make smells. And so if there were soldiers going around looking for babies, it was going to get hard to hide him. So notice verse 3. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes, it's like weeds, bushes for him, and daubed it with asphalt and pitch. These are very sticky, slimy substances. And put the child in it and laid it in the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Now his mother was fearless. It was fearless for her to hide him, but she was also full of hope. And here's the difference. There came a point where just being fearless was not enough. 3 months in, she knew she had to do something, and she had placed her hope in this child. She said, there's something special about my child. There's something significant about him, and I believe that God will use him one day in his life. And so I have a hope that God can use him if I'll do everything I can to protect him. So she puts him in the reeds, and his sister stands afar off. She's about 10, 11, 12 years old, and she would go out every day, and she would watch. And here's what I find interesting about Moses' family. Not only did Jochebed have hope, but she instilled that hope in her daughter. She said, I can't always watch Moses, so you need to go out there. And so his sister, she could have had other things to do. I'm sure she would have loved to have played with friends, but she went out there and she had a hope. And this is what's so incredible about this woman. Not only was she fearless, but she passed that fearlessness on. Not only was she full of hope, but she passed that hope on. And that's what a courageous, fearless, full of hope lady does. She doesn't just have it for herself. She passes it on to her kids and those around her. And so her daughter goes out there and watches. And then notice verse 5. Then the daughter of Pharaoh, the princess, she comes down to bathe at the river. And her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. Here's what you need to know. Here's why the maids found it. When Pharaoh's daughter was going to take a bath in the river, there were crocodiles in the river. You know what I'm saying? So they surely weren't going to risk her getting eaten by a crocodile. So when she would go in to bathe, you know what she would do? She would have her maidens form a circle around her. Sound like a fun job? And as she got into the water, that circle would stay around her. Do you know why? So that if there was a crocodile, the circle would break. And once the circle really broke, and everybody got back to the shore. That's a terrible job, all right? So these maidens, they weren't just like walking in. They would go probably with sticks or prods, and they would poke in the bulrushes, to see if there's a crocodile in there sleeping or waiting. And when they did, they found something. They found this basket. And they said, what's in here? And they open it up, and they discover a baby. Now notice this. And she opened it. And she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. Perfect timing, Moses. Way to go. So she had compassion. Had he just looked at her and maybe made a noise or some smell? No, he cried. All right, smart baby. He cries, and she has compassion. She had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Now, she knew full well that her father was the reason this child was being hidden. She knew full well this child was against the law. But notice what she does. Verse 7. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? Moses' sister is a friggin' genius, all right? She runs up, she says, oh, a baby. Might need somebody to nurse that. I know just the woman. She would love to do it. She would be more than glad. And here's what happens. Pharaoh starts paying Moses' mom to raise an illegal child that she gave birth to. Only God could write a story like that. It reminds me of a couple of years ago. I was with another church plant. We were planting a church, and we needed new carpet in this building. And so I went to a local carpet store, and I was just talking to the guy. And the guy was super friendly. He said, so you're looking for carpet for a church? I said, yeah. He said, you got a minute? I said, sure. And so he starts telling me this story. It's the craziest story I've ever heard. He said, well, I was working here, and this guy comes in, and he's like, I want plush, bright red carpet. And the guy's like, that's awful. He's like, I know, but I own a strip club. And I really want carpet on the floor, the walls, the ceiling, everything. He's like, that sounds awful. He's like, shut up. I'm at a strip club. Who cares? And so he's like, this guy comes in and he puts down 50% deposit. Now, you can't take the carpet without paying for it. And so the guy comes in 3 months later, puts another 10% down. His strip club's not going well. You know what I mean? He can't bring the money. And so finally he says, we call the guy and he goes out of business. And so we've got this carpet. At this point, he's paid like 75% of it off. And it's just awful red color. So we put it in a warehouse. We don't think anything of it. He said, and then this pastor comes in. And he says, hey, man, we're going on a missions trip to Brazil. There's this church at the top of a mountain. We're going to have to take carpet to it because our church has raised money to give them carpet. And down in Brazil, they really want red, awful, gaudy carpet. He said, how much? He said, about 12,000 square feet. He said, I've got exactly that much. And he starts going on. He said, here's the best part, man. He's like, I got to look him in the face. I said, I'm going to give it to the church because the devil already paid for it. And so that's what happened here, man. Moses, his mom is being paid by the devil incarnate. The guy that's killing all the babies is paying for Moses' mom to raise him, okay? And here's the best part. We think of nursing, we're like, well, it must have taken a few months, maybe a year. No, in the Old Testament, this was something that took years. And so she had about 5 or 6 years with Moses. And every day, she would get on his level and she would tell him, Moses, one day you're going to leave our home. You're going to go live with Pharaoh. You're not an Egyptian, Moses. You're a Hebrew. And here's where this matters. God has always looked out for our people. And God loves you, Moses, and he's protected you in a really special way, Moses. And you've got an incredible life ahead of you, Moses. They're going to teach you everything. They're going to give you the best math teachers, the best science teachers. They're going to give you all of the worldly wisdom that you could ever want or need. But here's what's important, Moses. Don't forget who you are. You are my child. You are a Hebrew. And your people are in bondage, Moses, and they will need you one day, Moses. And every day, she would instill in him who he was and why that mattered. And one day the day came, and she handed Moses over to Pharaoh and his court. And he was given the best education, a master's degree, as it were, from the best schools in the world. And he was raised with the best political scientists teaching him. He was raised with the best education. But somewhere in the back of his heart and in the back of his mind, he was never able to get away from the lessons his mother instilled in him as a young child, as a young boy. And here's what I want you to know, and this is why she is one of the 5 women we're going to talk about this month who changed the world. Do you understand that because of her faith, because of her fearlessness, and because of her hope that she not only had for herself, but she passed on to her child, she was part of raising and changing a child. Had she just given him over to Pharaoh, had she just handed him over, he would have been a very different individual. She was part of what shaped him and what made him the leader he would become 80 years later. Because you see, for the first 40 years, Moses lived in Pharaoh's court. And as he became a young man, he ran into a struggle, the struggle we all face. He wanted to identify himself with a tribe. That's why we love having a sports team that we root for. That's why we love associating ourselves with a community, whether it's a city or a community or a state. That's why we love rooting for our hometown college. That's why we love segmenting people groups into tribes. And Moses was no different. He wanted to align himself with a tribe. But he knew he had grown up in Pharaoh's court and they had paid for his education. But he also knew that he was a Hebrew. And so when he got about 40 years old, as a young man, he wanted to prove himself, and then he found an opportunity one day. He was out and he was watching these people, these Egyptians, take advantage of his Hebrew brothers and sisters, and they were beating 2 of his Hebrew brothers, and especially this one. And so he runs over and tries to defend that Hebrew and ends up killing the Egyptian, makes a big mistake. And he's run out of town. He's now a wanted man. Pharaoh knows about it, and he goes and hides in the desert for 40 long years. He finds a comfortable place where he's got a nice family, he's got a good job, he's taken care of, he's a wealthy man, and for the first 80 years of his life, I'm sure his mother thought, I did all this to save you. I did all this to train you and teach you. For what? For you to go be a shepherd in the desert? But that's not what God had in mind. Because one day God appeared to Moses and he began drawing him back to his purpose. And this is what changed everything for Moses. This is what I believe. I believe there became a crisis point in his life where he realized, my mother saved me. God intervened. I've been given all of the education anybody could ask for in this world. And a whole generation was slaughtered. And I was saved. I must have been saved for a reason. God must have had a plan for my life if he would go to all that trouble. And so you know the rest of the story. Moses comes back. He intervenes on behalf of his people. And he steps in and saves his people. Here's what I want you to get this morning. Here's what I want you to feel and hear. Moses' mother was fearless, but that just wasn't enough. There were lots of other women who did everything they could to hide their baby. There were lots of other families who fought tooth and nail to save their children. When it came down to it, What took her to the next level was not just that she was fearless, it's that she was fearless and full of hope. And hear me, individual, when you have a fearlessness, that can get you into trouble or that can do something for you. But when you have fearlessness mixed with hope, that changes everything. Because what you place your hope in determines what you are willing to do and what you are not willing to do. What you place your hope in is the big question this morning. And she was placing her hope in her child doing more than just saving his life. But in saving his life, and maybe just one day, he would come back and save his people. He would come back and let God use him to change history, and he did. He did. And to this day, the Hebrew people, they elevate and they honor Moses as their hero, the one who came to save them from bondage. And I've got great news this morning for you. Moses is not the only hero who did that in the Bible. God also tells us that we were given a hero and a savior from our bondage, and his name is Jesus. And we don't place our faith in Moses like Moses' mother did. We place our hope in Jesus. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's something we can't see, we can't touch, but it's something we hope for. And I don't place my hope in just my fearlessness alone. I place my hope in what Jesus has done and taken care of already to save me from the bondage of sin and this life and this culture and everything around us that wants to swallow us up. Jesus is that hope. So my question to you this morning is super simple. Are you fearless? I hope so. I hope so. I hope you don't live your life filled with fear. Fear is a 4-letter word to Christians. We should not be afraid. But I hope you're more than fearless. I hope you're not just reckless when it comes to fearlessness. I hope you're fearless, and I hope you're placing your hope in something bigger than your own courage, your own strength, your own wisdom. See, there came a point where Moses was pretty fearless, but he learned to place his faith and his hope in God. And that was the difference. Brave men come, brave men will go. Moses was surrounded by many brave men. Pharaoh had a lot of brave men who were willing to die for him. My question to you this morning is not, are you fearless? I hope you are. My question is, are you full of hope? Or let's be honest, does the world around us sometimes rob us of that hope? You know, I'm pretty sure that JoJo, Jochebed, when she would go out to the market and see mothers mourning the loss of their child, I'm sure that that would try to rob her of her hope. And she'd begin to wonder if her daughter was doing a good job watching out for Moses on those days he was in the river. I'm sure there were days when she would walk by the river and she would see babies thrown to crocodiles, and she would wonder if a crocodile had found that basket yet, and if she had lost a child and maybe even a daughter trying to save him. And I'm sure every day there were situations and there were things she saw that were capable of robbing her of her hope, but she would not let it rob her of her hope. And as a result of her fearlessness and her hope, something incredible happened. Something special took place. So this morning, here's what I want you to answer. Do you have hope? And here's my real question. What's your baby? For her, it was Moses. It's a baby in a bush, man. It's a baby in the river. What's your baby? What is it that you have that is a hope, a dream, a desire? Now, Moses' mother, her hope, her dream, her desire was that that child would live, he would survive, and he would one day rescue his people, and he did just that. What's your hope? What is your hope? Because just being fearless is not enough. You've got to have a hope, a desire, a dream of some sort. And without those hopes, those desires, those dreams, life, man, it's not even worth living. Because we come to the point, some point in your life, you came to the realization that life is about things that are unseen. Do you know what I mean? It's about having a hope, a dream, a goal, a desire, a love. Life is all about the things we can't see, feel, or touch. And she had that. Do you? Or are you just chasing everything that we can see, feel, and touch? Money, stuff, homes, cars, jobs. Because I'm going to tell you what, those things, they will come up empty. Maybe not in your 30s, maybe not in your 40s, but there will come a point in your life where those things, they will bounce their checks because they just don't have anything to back them up. So what is your hope? Here would be my encouragement. As a believer in Jesus, I have a hope. I have a faith in something I can't see. And it results in a hope of something I'm looking forward to. And that hope is this. Long after this life ends, this body ages, this body dies, my soul. See, Mark Neppel is not what you see. Mark Neppel is a soul. And this is the body that Mark Neppel's soul resides in. And long after this body is dead, this soul will spend eternity with Jesus, with God. That is my hope. So no matter what happens to me in this life, no matter what goes right, what goes wrong, I have a hope in eternity that will far outlast and outweigh whatever happens here. Maybe I live to be 100. 100 years here is nothing in comparison with forever in heaven. Maybe I live to be 80. 80 years here is nothing in comparison with forever in heaven. And when you have a hope like that no one can take from you, I'm going to tell you what, you can't help but be fearless, because nobody can take that from me. You could take away my joy. You could take away my enjoyment on this planet. You can make life hard for me, but you can't take my eternity from me, because it's mine and it's based on the hope and the faith in Jesus Christ. So I want to ask you, do you have something like that? Or are you placing your hope and your faith in that next job offer? That next house you buy is going to make everything better. That next marriage is going to fix everything. That next raise. See, this room is filled with people on both sides of that. We've got people in here who feel that way, and then we've got a lot of people in here. They've come to the other side of that. They look back and they've realized, like, that did not help. That did not fix it. That did not make life better. But placing your hope and your faith in something uniquely different from what you can see, what you can touch, that makes all the difference. I don't know what Jochebed owned. She was a slave, married to a slave. Maybe they had a few nice possessions, maybe they didn't. But every night when she went to bed, her heart was not wondering what happened to that pearl she had hidden under her bed. It was not wondering what happened to the 10 coins they had saved. It was not wondering what next year holds for them. It was wondering, what about Moses? That's where my heart is. That's where my hope is. Here's the good news. Jochebed was placing her faith in something that could be taken from her. You and I in the New Testament church, we're placing our faith in what's already been done. JoJo had this against her. She was living history. You know what I mean? She didn't know what the future held. We have this for us. We get to read her story, and we know what happened to Moses, and we know what happened next. And we also get to read what happened to Jesus. We also get to read what happened to the New Testament church. And so this morning, I'm not telling you that we're placing our hope and we're placing our faith in something that can be robbed from us like Moses could have been taken from her. This is a hope, this is a faith that cannot be taken away. In Christ, my hope, my faith, it cannot be taken from me. So let me ask you one last time and we're done this morning. Are you fearless? That's number one. Number two, are you fearless and full of hope? Number three, what are you placing your hope in? Because if you just place your hope in what this world has to offer, there's always a payback clause. There's always something that'll be taken from you. But in Jesus, I find hope with no strings attached. I find hope that lasts. So this morning, I want you to be like JoJo, like Jochebed. Have fearlessness. Marry it with a hope and place that hope in something that matters, that lasts. Just like Moses came to rescue his people, Jesus came to rescue us. And I know this. Right now, somebody in this room, they need to be rescued from their bondage. They need to be rescued from the death they are living through slowly. Being in slavery is like dying slowly, having your freedom taken from you and having no choices in your life. Some of us, if we're honest, we're living a dead life already. We're doing what we feel, what we lean toward, what we are born into, and we don't have the freedom to truly live life, a life on purpose, a life that is honoring to God, a life that is completely different and doesn't serve to seek me, but serves to seek those around me. That freedom is only found in the hope of Jesus. So if you're here this morning and you don't have that hope, I pray that you'd have it before the day's over. Would you pray with me?